Good evening and welcome to the 9th Annual Public Affairs Conference. My name is Cliff Smart, and it's my great pleasure to serve as president of Missouri State University and to welcome you to this great event tonight. This is one of our signature events on Missouri State University. It's really one of the ways I first became involved in the university before I was employed here. I came to a presentation at our Public Affairs Conference and found the conference to be educational and provocative and stimulating, and it is still one of my favorite events of the year, and I work very hard to attend as much of it as I can, even given the rigors of schedule. In a moment, Dr. Tammy Yonke will introduce our speaker tonight, Dr. Freeman Hrabowski, one of the nation's outstanding educational leaders, and I look forward, Freeman, to your remarks tonight. But first, I have the great pleasure of making a special announcement. Missouri State University is creating the Missouri Public Affairs Hall of Fame. Let me say that again, not the Missouri State Public Affairs Hall of Fame, the State of Missouri Public Affairs Hall of Fame, and we will induct the inaugural class into the hall next spring. And beginning tonight through August 31st, we invite and encourage your nominations for this inaugural class. We're looking for individuals who have a connection to Missouri and who have made significant impact in public affairs-related endeavors. We will be providing information about the Hall of Fame throughout this conference, and it will start tonight. As you leave, you will receive a flyer about the Hall of Fame, and we will also be promoting it on a website and through various other means of communication. You know, since being granted the statewide mission in public affairs in 1995, Missouri State has woven the public affairs mission into the fabric of campus life and into our community, and we believe it is time we share the positive impact public affairs can have with our entire state, and we believe the Missouri Public Affairs Hall of Fame will help accomplish that goal. I know everyone here is a true believer in the power of public affairs, or you wouldn't be here tonight, so I hope you will help spread this word and think seriously about the individuals who should be in this inaugural class. We're very excited with this new addition to our public affairs mission, and we look forward to an annual induction dinner beginning next spring. I will be attending many of the conference sessions, and I hope to see you there often. Please feel free to introduce yourself to me if we have not met. And now let me introduce one of our outstanding academic deans, Dr. Tammy Yonke, Dean of the College of Natural and Applied Sciences, and she will introduce our plenary speaker for this evening. Again, thank you for being here. Tammy, it's all yours.
I am really excited about this evening because one of my passions is student success in STEM. And for those of you who don't know what STEM is, it's science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. In the state of Missouri, it used to be METS for a while when we had a stem cell initiative that people didn't like. So we changed it to METS, which was math, engineering, technology, and science. It's back to STEM again, so that's a good thing. But it's something that it is near and dear to my heart. Our speaker tonight has written a couple of books, and they will be available at Paw Prints, and we'll do a book signing. I've read both of the books. They're absolutely outstanding. What I, though, am trying to figure out is I have them on my Kindle. How do you sign Kindles? So I'll have to figure out how to do that as well. Our speaker tonight graduated at age 19 from Hampton Institute with highest honors in mathematics. At the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, he received his master's in mathematics and his PhD in higher education administration at age 24. He holds honorary doctorates from more than 20 institutions, including Harvard, Princeton, and Duke, and also University of Michigan. He currently is president of the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and he has been president for 20 years. His research and publications focus on science and math education with special emphasis on minority participation and performance. He serves as a consultant to the National Science Foundation, the National Institute of Health, and the National Academies. U.S. News and World Report named our speaker as one of America's best leaders, while Time magazine named him one of America's 10 best college presidents and one of the 100 most influential people in the world. It is a great honor that tonight I have the opportunity to introduce to you Dr. Freeman Hrabowski.
Thank you, Tammy. Thank you very much, Tammy. Thank you. Good evening. Good evening again. So, has anyone read the book A Whole New Mind, W-H-O-L-E, A Whole New Mind by Daniel Pink? I'd recommend it to the students. It is a book that focuses on moving from the information age to the conceptual age. And it makes the point that the 20th century was a time when people were especially interested in logic and analytical skills, the importance of sequential thinking. That the 21st century will be a time when people are, of course, continuing to be concerned about analytical thinking, but also about not just left brain, but right brain thinking. That the right brain focuses more on creativity, on getting out of the box, maybe being a little kooky, not so much the linear approach, and says the essence of the point is that the greatest thinking will combine both right and left brain skills, and that those who will thrive in the 21st century will learn both types of skills. Now, I tell you that because I'm about to do something that is in the spirit of a whole new mind. I start here physically because there is a real problem right now. And the problem is I've got this great divide between me and you. And I feel like you're way out there somewhere, and somehow I am up here on a stage and I'm to talk to you, at you, whatever, and you're laid back somehow, and you can passively prepare for that paper you got to write in that grad course as you compare, right? And so the first thing I'm doing that is a little different is to move away from that stage and, in the spirit of the mathematics of it all, figure out how I can minimize the distance between you and me and maximize a sense of intimacy and of community among the people. And so as soon as I get to hear Cody, Mary Jo, I get this sense, right, that all of a sudden I am not so different from you, I am not so far apart from you, but rather we become more of a sense of a group having a conversation. I begin with the notion that most children, whether they're Riley's age, and I am focusing my talk tonight on Riley, who is 13. You all give Riley a big hand for being here tonight, first of all. That kids who are 13 in class often see the teacher as being way up there, and they're back here somewhere having to do this. Number two, that whether you're undergrad or grad students, quite frankly, even though you may not admit it, the fact is, most of the time in class, quite frankly, you're bored. You're doing what you're doing because you have to get the degree, because you want to get a good job, and you like the work, whether it's in student affairs or in math and science even. But often the experience in American education is not one of active engagement, of excitement about the work. Each of us is the product of our childhood experiences, whether it's Cliff Smart, who grew up in Arkansas and who was a lawyer and who developed the emotional intelligence to deal with people so much that people said he'd be a good president. Or it is, quite frankly, Riley, who's 13, who's right now having experiences shaped because his mother told him he had to come here tonight and listen to me talk. And he was nice enough to do it and to look like he was interested, which is cool. Or it's the grad students who've decided they want to be in student affairs because somehow somebody made a difference in their lives, and they're trying to figure out, okay, how can I be effective as a person working at a university? Or it's somebody who is excited about math and science. Let me ask this question. One of the things about a speaker who is going to be effective is he needs or she needs to know the audience. So, how many of you are grad students? Let me see your hands. A lot of grad students. Now, I know a number of you are in student affairs area. How many are undergrad? Let me see that. How many of you are majoring in a STEM area? Let me see that. Get a feel for it, okay. How many are in the arts, humanities, and social sciences? How many of you consider yourselves smart? How many of you would consider yourselves very hard workers? Okay, all right. How many of you know exactly what you're going to be doing 5 years from now? Oh, it's very interesting, a few. Very interesting, very interesting. David Brooks wrote a book, the New York Times columnist, that people find somewhat controversial. I like his book, The Social Animal. The theme of the book is this, that, and Christiana would appreciate this because she's got all these minors and majors, I remember this, right? And it was one of the students in the back, an undergrad, who said he was in likes global stuff. You'll appreciate this. David Brooks says this, that regardless of whether you're in America or wherever you are in the world, that while you may think that your actions are the result of logical thinking and rational behavior, that many of the times when we make decisions when we're 45 years old or 60, those decisions have been heavily influenced by something that happened to us when we were 12 years old. That often things happen that we've forgotten about that still have an impact on our approach to life, on the way we make decisions. And so I promised that I was going to tell something about being a certain age, like 12 or 13. Okay, Riley, here you go. This is my promise to you, okay? So I'm sitting in church. If you've not seen it, the TED Talk people just released a talk I gave in California a few months ago. It just came out yesterday. So I'm getting all these great comments from teenagers and others about the culture of science. I was 12 years old in Birmingham, Alabama. I was always a kid who loved math. I've always gotten goosebumps doing math. I still get goosebumps when I give kids math problems. And the teacher would give us 10 problems, and I would say, give us 10 more, teacher. And the whole class would go every day, shut up, Freeman. It was something everybody said. That was a designated kicker for me every day of my life. Every day somebody kicked me for being so excited about math, all right? And there were two things that I loved. I loved math, and I loved to eat. So I was this fat little kid loving mathematics. And in the South, you love those fat cheeks, right? So like Riley's mother, my mother makes me go and hear this man talk in church about civil rights. What do I care about civil rights? And I'm sitting in the back of the room, and to placate me, my parents let me do the two things I love to do. So I'm back in the back of the room doing a math problem and eating M&Ms. Loved M&Ms with peanuts in them, a lot of them, right? And all of a sudden, the man says, and if the children participate in this peaceful demonstration, all of America will understand that even kids really want a good education. And I looked up, I said, who is that guy? And of course his name was Dr. Martin King. And we got home that night, and I said, I want to go. I want to participate because I'm tired of being in schools where we get the hand-me-down books. I mean, the little kids of color received the books after the white kids had used them and they were torn up. So, I mean, literally, when I was in the second grade, the little book had brown paper bag. You know, they put the paper bag, brown paper over the books to cover up the front and the back. And the teacher said, don't pull the paper back. Well, of course, little fat Freeman, very curious. I peeled the paper back, and I see the name of the little white school because we were black kids. We were in one school, and they were in another. That was a much nicer school. And I go up to her, and I said, why did they give us their books after they've been using them for years? First thing she said was, boy, I told you not to peel that paper off that book. So I was going to get punished for that. But then she was embarrassed. And she said something, though, that was very powerful. She said, you don't have time to be a victim. She said, just get the knowledge. The book may be second rate, but the knowledge is still worth getting. And you are a child of God. You're not second rate. Don't be a victim. It was a very important message about not being defined, not letting other people define who I was. And so the idea of going and participating in this little peaceful march, just marching to go up to City Hall, all we wanted to do was to go and symbolically kneel and pray to be given a chance to go to good schools. That was the point. And to be able to drink out of water fountains, little, just basic things. And my parents said, absolutely not. And I said, well, then you all are hypocrites. Now, at that time, Riley, you didn't talk back to your parents. You really didn't. So immediately they said, go to your room. And the next morning they came in, and they'd had a difficult night, and they said, it wasn't that we don't trust you, we don't know what will happen. But they allowed me to go, and I did spend I went and I led a group of kids. I had skipped some grades, so I was getting ready. I'd skipped a couple of grades, so I was getting ready to go to the 10th grade. Though I was 12, I was more mature. And I took the little kids with me, and unfortunately, and they put us all in jail for a week. And it was an awful week, but in the middle of the week, Dr. King came and said, with our parents outside, and all these little kids were crying, wanting to get out. It was awful. And he said, what you do this day as children will have an impact on children who've not been born. And we didn't understand the significance then. But the significance was that the time would come very quickly when children of all races would have more opportunities to go to all kinds of schools. And that's the thing that makes America great, that more and more children can get a good education. Depending on where they are, it's better and better. Now, why do I tell you this story? That story defined my approach to the world. It taught me that children with 12 and 13 can think well. That whether a child is 13 or 17, if we give that student the respect to say you can think well, if we expect that child to rise to the occasion, all things are possible. It is amazing how mature children can be when they're treated with respect and with high expectations, whether it's college students or kids in middle school. Now, the other part, though, was, to me, math represented the right to be really smart. It represented a chance to do all kinds of things. One of the questions that one of the students asked me in the back was, well, why aren't we including other areas besides STEM? Why are we just talking about math, science, engineering, computer science? Why aren't we talking about the arts and humanities? And I have to say, the arts and humanities, even in a STEM conversation, it's very important to make the point that people who are broadly educated, who study the humanities and social sciences and arts, become broad thinkers. They get this liberal education, and they're able to solve problems from different perspectives. I was fortunate to have a mother who was an English teacher first, who went back and got something called the new math. Anybody old enough to remember the new math? Remember, the new math was not as successful because college people were condescending towards K through 12. They went, we'll tell you what to do. They didn't realize that the teachers have the expertise of children. They know the behavior of children. College professors may understand concepts in mathematics, but they didn't really know how to deal with children. And rather than being partners, what happened was that a lot of people got even more frightened. And my mother was willing to, she loved math anyway, and she was a great literature teacher. She said, I'll go back and try it, and I was her guinea pig. And so I was learning poetry and math problems and getting rewarded with food all the time. So I was getting fatter and smarter all the time. I really was. My wife worked to get me not to be so fat. So I do, if students don't know it, I do something called P90X. You know P90X? I do that with my students. I mean, so I've got my abs back. So I'm very pleased. I'm very pleased. All right. But here is the deal. This is what I want you to think about. She would always quote from people like Emily Dickinson, who said, tell the truth, but tell it slant. And Zora Neale Hurston in her book, Their Eyes Were Watching God. And I'd hear her saying, ships at a distance have every man's wish on board. For some, they come in with the tide. For others, they sail forever on the horizon, never out of sight, never landing, until the watcher turns his head away in resignation, his dreams mocked to death by time. That is the life of men, and she would say, and women. She was talking about two kinds of people whose dreams become reality, and then those who, in the words of Langston Hughes, whose dreams are forever deferred. And here was my mother's point. The people who see their dreams fulfilled are people who get a good education. The way America, you're studying the history of higher education. When I was marching in the 60s, let me ask you this. What % of Americans do you think had completed college? What would you think? Anybody? What percent? Let me hear it. I heard 30, I heard 10. Anybody else? 14, anybody else? Come on, students, don't be risk adverse. Try it, try it. It was literally 10%. 10%. It was 2% of blacks, 11% of whites. Only 11% of whites. People say, how could that be possible? Well, in the 60s, you didn't have to have a college degree to get a good job. People worked at the steel plants and manufacturing. There were all kinds of wonderful jobs. In fact, a lot of people were just trying to get a high school diploma in the 60s, right? And so it was a different world. Today, what percent of Americans have a college degree? What do you think? Come on, y'all so risk adverse. Come on. Four-year college degree, at least four-year college. That's good question. 4 years, at least 4 years. I hear 35. Anybody else? 45, 50. Anybody else? Okay. So we finally got as a country last year up to 30% of Americans 25 and older having college degrees. Now, what you'll find is this is all about the history of higher education, right? So here's what's interesting. What percent, and you know, for the first time, you need to know this, for the first time last year, half of all babies born in America were of color. Half last year. So the country is increasingly diverse, and so you have to look at what's happening to different populations. What's the fastest growing population in our country? Hispanic. 1 of every 4 Americans will be Hispanic by about 2025. Okay? Now, let me ask you this. What percent of Hispanics do you think have a college degree? 3, 8. It's only 14%. It's the lowest. What percent of blacks? 20. It's actually 19, not bad. Okay? What percent of whites? You all really are risk adverse. It's very interesting. Just throw out something, huh? It's actually 35%. Now, most of my friends, white, black, Hispanic, will say, that couldn't be true because everybody I know has a college degree. And I say, duh, you know, lawyers are around lawyers, nurses are around nurses, people are around people who work in the same field. Plumbers are around plumbers, right? You know, and so the fact is that most Americans don't realize 2/3 of Americans over 25 do not have a college degree. And the fastest growing population, the least, 14%. And so I'm now the chair of something called the president appointed me a few months ago as chair of this National Commission on Educational Excellence, starting with African Americans. There's somebody in Hispanics, there's somebody in general, and we work together to look at what can we do to get the numbers up. The goal for the country is to have 55% of Americans with a college degree. But her question is very good. It's not just a 4-year degree. When we say 55%, we want 2- and 4-year degrees. For many students, let me say this, it would be much better if they went to a 2-year institution and got something practical than trying to get a liberal arts degree. It's not for them right now to get a degree in history. That doesn't mean they can't eventually do it if they want later on, but they'd be much better off getting a degree than starting in a liberal arts and dropping out. For your college and most colleges, only about half the students who start in college graduate. Now suppose we found out that in hospitals, half the people who went there died. Think about it. The country would be saying unacceptable, right? But if somebody comes to college with this goal of getting a degree and they leave without one with plenty of debt, you get my point? It's not a good thing, and yet the country has not said this is unacceptable. We need to do something about that. Now, to the global perspective again, here's a question that is going to, two points. First of all, how many of you between the ages of 35 and 70? Okay, I've got good news for you and bad news. Which one you want first, good or bad? The bad news, you're getting old. Get over it. You're getting old. I can say that. I'm 60. Wait a minute. The good news is you are the most if you're an American, you're the most educated human beings in the world, with the exception of one group of people in one country. What country is slightly better educated than us? Do you know what it is? It's Canada. Canada is slightly better educated, just slightly better educated, okay? Now, how many of you are between 25 and 34? Okay, I've got good news and bad news. Which one you want first? Bad news, you're not as smart as we are. Meaning what? While we're number 2, those of us between 35 and 60-something, you're all the way down to number 12 in the world. In other words, and it's not because a lot of people aren't still getting a college degree. The problem is this. Other countries are moving ahead of us. They've been doing much more than we've been doing globally to get more people with 2- and 4-year degrees. That's the point, okay? Now, the good news, though, is I have good news for you. You want the good news? We are jealous as hell. We wish we were your age, all right? we would even mind being less smart. If we could be your age again, we would do it, all right? Don't let anybody fool you. To be 25 again, enjoy being 30, all right? You won't always be there, I promise you, all right? But, all right, and then one more global question that is meant to be upsetting. You ready for this? Hold your seats now. Listen to the question carefully. How many of you believe there are many more brilliant Chinese and Indian children than American children? Many more brilliant Chinese and Indian children than American children. Some say that's a politically incorrect question, but it's not. It's a mathematical question, right? You have 1.3 billion Chinese, 1.1 billion Indians. You put those two together, you have 2.4 billion people. The top 10% of any population will be extraordinary. What is now? Okay, let's see how much you like math. What percent of what is 10% of 2.4 billion? Come on now, don't let me leave Missouri State saying they don't know the math. 10% of 2.4 billion. 240 million. I'm getting big. I'm about to have a heart attack right here. 240 million, right? Right? You knew that. You knew that. 240 million people. How many Americans are there in total? 310. So those two countries have almost as many geniuses as we have citizens. And when you go to the PhD programs in computer science from my campus, where you've got students from 150 countries, literally, with the PhD students in computer science being heavily Indian, in certain areas Chinese, you know, to MIT, you will find 60–70% of the PhD students in certain disciplines come from those two countries. Now, you add to that the fact that many of the most impressive scientists and humanists in America, Nobel laureates, throughout the 20th century, had at least one parent who came from another country. If you look, most out of New York, they grew up in homes where parents didn't speak English well, usually a European country. They went to the poor man's Harvard City College, Brooklyn College, and they went on and they got the Nobel Prize in biochemistry, in the humanities. Why? Hunger. This belief that America was the greatest place in the world and that one had to take advantage of that education. The reason, I mean, at MIT right now, 70–80% of the undergrads in STEM areas have at least one parent from another country. On my campus, 65% of the honor students, one parent at least. And that's of all races, from Russia and China to Nigeria and the islands. What is the difference? It's that hunger for the knowledge. I was talking with students and having great conversation about homework and studying, and Cody and Kelsey and others, and it was very interesting to me that they are very smart and they work hard. But when you have Americans, I want you to think about this, students, if they are not around with that international influence, they typically will not be as hardworking as when they see how hard people from other places work. So when I've had these conversations with my students, again, I say from 150 countries, and many came here when they were 13, others when they were 8, and I'll ask about study habits, and always the kids who came here in the last year or two worked the hardest. Those who came when they were 13 worked the next level. And then my really bright kids of different races will come in after that in terms of amount of work. And I asked the question, why is it that students who come from other places work harder than Americans who were born here? And a young woman from Jamaica said, I have an answer, and I don't mean to insult my American friends. She said, but it seems to me that for many Americans of all races, when they do go to college, the fact is that it's like grade 13. It's just what happens after high school. She said, but for me, if I don't excel, my younger brothers and sisters may not eat. So it's not the icing on the cake, grade 13. My education is the very bread of life. And there is the essence of what we talk about when we say excellence. You know, and my message tonight as I talk about the math and science has that global context, has that real challenge of how do we get more Americans in general who are able to graduate from college, who want to come to college, either 2 or 4 year, some kind of post-secondary opportunity, we would say. If you've not looked at the movie called Jobs for the Future, They talk a lot about all the types of biotech, IT, and other kinds of jobs for two-year people or for one-year certificates, because so many students are bored in school, and males, especially of all races, are going to college at lower rates than females. Women are making progress in going to college. There are some areas like technology where we've got to do a much better job with women, but guys, middle class, working class, low-income boys, white, black, Asian, Hispanic, are not going to college at the rates of their female counterparts. And the number one reason, boredom. They want something where there's more connecting. Now, let's get to math and science. Here's the question. How many of you knew by the time you were in the 11th grade that you were either a math, science type or a history, English, and arts type? Everybody knew. It's an American story, right? Now, if I asked you why, you'll probably say I was just better at one thing or the other. What I would argue is this. We have this assumption in our country that either math and science is for you or it really is not. And teachers even say it to children through their body language and sometimes through their words. This is not for you. You know, I had a student tonight, and she was so smart, freshman, who was saying that when she was in the 4th grade, the teacher just told her just that. But she took it to mean it's a challenge. I will show her, and she's a math major here now. You know, but most people get so discouraged, you know, because what happens is we expect students to get it like this. And if they don't get it like this, it's not for them. I was a part of an international study group years ago involving American leaders, 6 of us, German leaders, and Japanese leaders. And we spent, every 6 months, we were in one of those places in Baden-Württemberg, in Stuttgart, or we were in Kanagawa, the Kanagawa prefecture in Yokohama, and then we were in the state of Maryland. And we were looking at everything from the environment to the economic situation. I was representing Education for America. And so I was studying education in those countries and a lot of other countries. And this is what I saw with Japanese mothers. 2 children in the same house. One kid gets it like this. The other kid takes much longer to get it. But the mother says, but they'll both get it. And they'll both get A's. They just learn differently. I got my worst grades in my mother's class in the 8th grade. And it was for this reason. I am blessed and cursed with, if I'm not tired, with a photographic memory. I can memorize stuff. Now, if you don't know it, if a student gives the teacher exactly what she said back on the test, the teacher doesn't even realize it's her words, but she goes, wow, that's brilliant. That's really good. I mean, I can't tell you how often I had somebody putting on my paper superb. All I did was literally regurgitate exactly what the teacher said, whether it's in the way I solved the math problem or in an explanation. And the teacher just didn't even remember. The teacher just doesn't remember it. It's human nature. When you hear yourself, when you hear somebody saying what you like and think, oh my God, this is wonderful. This is just wonderful. Well, my mother knew exactly what I was doing. So what she would do was to make sure the problems that she gave me would not allow me simply to give a memorized answer. And she tricked me every time. So I got a lot of B's in my mother's class. And my son, who's now grown, who's 35, says, Dad, you got those B's, get over it and stop talking about it, all right? And he says to my wife and me, both of us are very high achievers. We're neurotic about working hard to get that A+, right? And he says, you know, Dad, you and Mama are not just nerds, you're mega nerds, all right? To which I respond, yeah, but mega nerds can pay all their bills when they're grown, all right? If you've got grown kids, you know what I'm talking about. But the point is that when we think about math and science, you notice how the American phenomenon, the question we face, the challenge we face in the country is, why is it that we need to keep talking about STEM? He asked a good question about why we need to talk about people graduating. We need people in the arts. We need people in the humanities. Of course we do. The humanities teach us about what it means to be human, my God. I mean, there's so many critical ethical questions we have to deal with. So to talk about STEM should not take anything away from the significance of arts, humanities, and social sciences. You know, when I talk about my loving math, it taught me how to solve problems. It taught me to be analytical, but I also learned a lot about analytical skills from studying T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland. I'm still studying. I'm still reading it and struggling with it. You know, or the fact that I had to take piano lessons all my life. When I play a Chopin nocturne, what I'm getting, I mean, it elevates my spirit. You know, so one might say arts and humanities and social sciences really teach us how to live our lives, how to put it in perspective relationships, how to develop that emotional intelligence. So as I talk about STEM, again, understand the context of arts, humanities, and social sciences. But here's the point. Why is STEM so important? Number one, when we think about health care, when we think about all the health disparities, when we think about the fact that we all want to live longer, look younger, and be healthy, at the root of health, medicine, science. We know that. You know, areas like bioengineering. In my area, on my campus, biochemistry and mathematics together with computational sciences, the Human Genome Project. Everybody's working on internships involving understanding how we're going to have personalized medicine. Everybody will have their own specific type of medicine for different kinds of diseases. So whether talking about diseases or healthcare in general. Number two, intelligence and defense. Again, in the Baltimore-Washington corridor, we're very sensitive to that because you've got the National Security Agency for the military and NIST, the National Institutes of Science and Technology, over cybersecurity for the country. We've got these challenges from around the world of people working to attack us in different ways. And so we've had to redesign our cybersecurity curriculum, for example, because now the Chinese have set another standard. Before, we were teaching the computer science majors how to defend America. But now, if you're in computer science, you know this. Now, what the Chinese are doing, it's not about defending, it's about attacking. And so you've got to teach computer science majors how to be aggressive. Now, what is interesting is the National Security Agency will tell you, but we need more women and people of color and people from low-income backgrounds because to defend our country, we need to have the thinking and the talents of people from different socio-cultural backgrounds, racial backgrounds, and both genders, because in other countries, that's what they have. When they are coming up with strategies to attack, they've got more women giving their perspective. And the way a woman will develop and design something can be very different from what a guy will do. We see that in the making of cars. We see it in so many ways. And so if only the guys are doing it, we are not defending our country. As gross as that might sound, as cruel, the fact is that we are under attack. And we have to teach people of all races, women and men, from different economic backgrounds, the skills so they can contribute their perspective to the work. Same thing in healthcare. You know, if you are a woman from a low-income background, or if you're a woman who's Hispanic or black, there's about a multiple chance that when you're 55, you're going to have diabetes. And to solve that problem, you need women from those backgrounds who can bring that perspective. Similarly, when talking about the environment, if you've read any of Al Gore's new books, the new book is called The Future. A lot of it on the global warming issue. Tom Friedman, the thought leader in the country, talking about just the global warming issue. And the fact is that at the heart of environmental issues will be basic science. So on my campus, we've got a lot of students who are combining environmental engineering, environmental policy, environmental science. So in intelligence, in defense, in healthcare, in environment, in all those areas, at the root will be science. But at the same time, great jobs for people who are studying global studies, political science, policy, because you need not just the people who know the technical side, you need people who can work with Congress, most of whom are not scientists, to shape policies that will invest money in different kinds of programs. So because I chaired this National Academies Committee on Underrepresentation in Science, I'm working on the Hill a lot and over at the White House to look at what we do to increase the number of math and science teachers and to talk about more people of all races. Inclusive excellence talks about everybody, from white guys to Hispanic women. And the question is, how do you get people of all races, men and women, doing really well in going to college and doing well, and then in STEM areas? And the big problem we have is this. When we did this study with the National Academies, it was not surprising that only 20% of blacks and Hispanics who started with a major in science graduated with a major in science. What percent of white Americans do you think who start with a major in science and engineering graduate with a bachelor's in science and engineering? What do you think? 50? Anybody else? It's only 32%. Only 32% of whites make it. What about the highest achieving group in our country, which is what? Asian American. We know that, right? We know that by now, right? Mathematical, okay? No reason to be sensitive. Americans get really sensitive. We've got to be able to talk about these issues as facts. You can't solve a problem if you don't state the problem. We know that blacks and Hispanics are at the bottom academically because they're at the bottom economically. We know that the Asians are overrepresented because many more come here to go to grad school. That's the question I didn't ask you. You know, I said 30%, 35% of whites have a college degree. What percent of Asian Americans have a college degree? What do you think? It's 55%. Because most of my students who are of Asian descent, and 20-some% of my students are of Asian descent, all of their parents came here to grad school and stayed. So what happens is a lot of grad students from India, from China, from Korea, come here and stay. And so when you look at the science infrastructure in our country, you're going to see a very heavy percentage from other countries. The difference and the challenge we face is that all of those people who've been coming here to grad school can now go back to their country for opportunities. So all of my Indian students who are in math and statistics can go, and computer science, they can go back to Mumbai and work for IBM in Mumbai. They don't have to stay here. And so America is saying, what are we going to do? How do we get more people from this country? Because the study, you just heard me say, 2/3 of Americans who start in science don't make it. Now, the professors will say it's a K through 12 problem. That's only a part of the issue. And what my campus has been working on is to ask the question, how do we change the culture of science, teaching, and learning, both in K through 12, but also at universities? On every campus in America, liberal arts college to the Ivies, the fact is first-year science is viewed as weed-out courses. And places that want to make a difference need to ask the question, what's the probability that a student, young woman, young man, of color, white, who starts in math, who starts in chemistry, will make it? And if they don't make it, why? And the assumption simply shouldn't be it's only because they didn't do well academically, because recent studies are showing a finding that seems counterintuitive. And here is what the finding says. The higher the test scores, ACT or SAT, the larger the number of AP credits, the more prestigious the university, the greater the probability the student who starts in engineering or pre-med will leave it within the first year. Did you get that? So all the kids who are valedictorians, and I make the joke, I was telling Cliff this, I make the joke that all the pre-meds become pre-law. A lot of kids who wanted, they're lawyers today because they can read and write and think well. In math and science, with the quantitative base, performance is unpredictable. You get 5 math problems, 3 you've seen before, 2 the person has changed around. If you've not worked in a group, you really don't know, and you find yourself getting a D on that test. It happens all the time. You get a D in the first half of the semester, it's over for the course. And so most people get wiped out. So the more enlightened approach we are arguing, and my campus is doing this now, is that we are redesigning first-year work to focus more on group study, to have more use of technology, to flip the classes so you're not just standing up there lecturing, to give faculty the support to look at best practices and to redesign courses, and most important, to have a kind of monitoring of trends in order to keep working on ways of increasing the number, not only who will graduate, but who will graduate in math and science. The study that we conducted with the Academy shows that while 12% of students, 24 and 25-year-old college graduates in Europe have college degrees, only 6% of Americans have degrees in science and engineering. And for minorities becoming an increasing part of the population, 2%. And at the PhD level, you have almost no minorities who've made it. The significance of my campus as a predominantly white place is we've become the leading producer of minority kids, particularly black kids, who go on and get science PhDs and MD PhDs from Harvard to Stanford. And how have we done it? Building community among the students, with the notion that it takes scientists, researchers to produce researchers, much more emphasis on getting the students into the work, but looking analytically at what background the student has to have in order to have a reasonable chance of making it. And then what we learned from the minority students, we're now using with our white students in redesigning the whole culture. Best news is for students and for my student affairs people is that we were able to work with the student government to get them to make their #1 goal the graduation and retention of students, #1, and #2, helping students in science stay there. So these are my political science majors. And what they did was they took a lot of their play money. They get a lot of money. Millions of dollars students get from fees that they can use for bringing in, bands and having a good time. And we wanted to have a good time. But they decided to leverage their money with our money to redesign physical spaces on campus, from the library to the commons, student union, where students could work in groups comfortably and support each other. So when I talk with student affairs people, and they say, what can we do to make a difference? I would argue that to the extent, going all the way back to my childhood, that you can help 17-year-olds or 20-year-olds realize how well they can think, to the extent that you can show them that they are special, that Riley at 13 or somebody at 19 can do more than they think they can do, to the extent that you can have them feeling, quite frankly, that they can change the world, all kinds of things are possible. You know, I close with a story from my mother, because I think stories inspire. My mother spent her whole life, literally, as a child, having learned to read by working as a maid in a house and becoming just a wonderful English teacher, then math teacher. And at the end of her life, my mother, who had been this great math teacher and English teacher, had developed Alzheimer's. And you never want to see your mother go downhill. And I'll never forget, we'd convinced her to come and live with us in Baltimore. And she didn't want to come because she didn't want to leave her church. And we said, we've got churches in Baltimore, and we had to get involved. But she had been so smart, she had hidden from us that she was having this dementia problem. And when we finally realized it, I realized she really didn't know who I was. Now, I'm an only child. And she knew I was familiar, but she really didn't know, and it was a very hurtful thing. And one day we were sitting on the porch outside looking at the trees, and she looked at me and she said something that you never want to hear from your parent. She said, "I know the end is near." But then I said, well, what's important to you? Because when somebody tells you that they know they're not going to live long, you will get the essence of what they considered important in their lives. And she said, she thought about it, and with the sweetest smile, she said, what's important? Relationships. And first, she could tell I was trying not to cry, trying to be positive. She said to me something she said all my life. She said, my relationship with God, she said, hold on to your faith. You'll be okay. And then she said, my relationship with my husband, he's a wonderful man. She'd forgotten my father had died 25 years before. Then she shocked me, because I'm an only child, right? She looks me right in my face and she says, you know, I have a son. And all of a sudden, my grief turns to anger. Because I'm thinking, she's about to tell me she had a kid when she was a teenager and she never told me about it. And I'm thinking, I'm 40-something years old at that time, this is years ago. I'm thinking to myself, if I haven't had a brother at this point, I don't want a brother. And you are not going to drop this mess in my lap and die, all right? I mean, I'm looking evil. I'm thinking like my students, TMI, too much information. If you haven't told me to this point, don't you dare tell me this now. And then I'd forgotten she didn't know who I was. And she looked at me and she said, he's a college president. Thank God she was talking about me, all right? But then she gave me a gift that I give to everybody in this room. Whether you're going to be a student affairs person, or whatever you do as a professor, she said this, and I think about it every day. She said, you know, but I now understand that teachers touch eternity through their students. Teachers touch eternity through their students. Whatever I had to give in life, my sense of right and wrong, my lust for learning, my belief that every child was as special, I gave it to them, and I will always live through them. I'll never forget when I went back and spoke in Birmingham, and all these teachers who were about to retire came up to me, wanting to hug me, saying, your mother didn't just teach me to read, she taught me to love to read. And then the woman who really got me was, she said, your mother went to the projects, to my grandmama's and my mama's poor little place in the project, and said, send your daughter to college. And they said, no, she's got to get a job and get married. She said, no, she must go to college. She said, your mother made them. She filled out the financial aid forms. They got me to college. And because I went and made it and became a teacher and could get a car and an apartment, I could convince my younger brothers and sisters to do the same thing. And that's the history of higher education for all of our races. That the first person in the college, the first person in the family who goes to college, people watch to see what's going to happen. And if that person does well, younger brothers and sisters. This has been the history of American higher education, especially since the 60s with the 1965 Higher Education Act, and especially since the Veterans Act in 1944. But in 65, that's when we had more and more people going to college. And that's the essence of a higher education for our country. The question becomes, where would we be if so many people had not gotten that college degree? I close with a quote from Aristotle that I'm using all this year. It says, excellence is never an accident. Excellence is never an accident. It is the result of high intention, sincere effort, and intelligent execution. It represents the wisest option among many alternatives. And finally, he said this, choice, not chance, determines your destiny. Choice, not chance, determines your destiny. The question from Morehead State, What do you choose? Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Great. Some questions, right? Great. Let's get some questions, and if somebody has some water, that's great. Okay, questions, please. Ask me some questions, guys, quickly. Yes?
Hi, my name is Shoaib Mitra. I'm a professor of physics
Yes.
at MSU. I have a comment and a,
Yes.
and a question. I'll pick up on the very last thing you said about
Yes.
choice.
Yes.
I was a faculty at University of Tulsa
Uh-huh.
for quite a while, and we had an Eisenhower grant where we brought in teachers.
Right.
We did summer workshops on physics with them. One of the things I realized is that they had no background were asked to teach science in physics. And if you go to any rural Oklahoma school, you will find that there is no dearth in funding
Right.
for the football team.
Right.
But
But
the physics labs are
yes.
underfunded.
Yes. Yes.
That makes me think that it is a matter of choice
Yes.
that society makes.
Yes.
The importance that society gives us,
Yes.
to science.
Yes.
And that is a major problem.
Yeah. No. So you can hear what he's saying is that he was in another state where a lot of the teachers did not have backgrounds in physics, for example, and yet you found in Oklahoma, and yet you found a lot of money for the football team, but not money to have a physics teacher. So you're absolutely right. It is that our country has to decide what's important. You know, when I'm in Texas, I always tell them it's a great state. I've never met a Texan who didn't love Texas. They love some Texas. I think it's the way they teach history, and they used to be their own country, you know, right? I mean, it's wonderful. But I also say this, and this always gets me into trouble there, but they keep inviting me back. I said, but if this state could put as much emphasis on algebra as it puts on physics, as it puts on football, rather, every child would be doing calculus. Now, half the people applaud. The other half are really upset because they somehow feel I've insulted, next to God, football. You know, and then they'll say, well, Dr. Hrabowski, you know you played football in high school. How could you insult? I said, wait a minute. I did not put football down. I just said be as excited about math as you are as football, right? And besides that, I was a little nerd. I didn't play football in high school, which makes me very suspect to them. And I say it because, unfortunately, you're right, in many places, unfortunately, there's not the emphasis on the academics in general. It's much easier to see a sports figure in the paper, even in high school, than a kid who did well in physics. You know, it's real quiet. So one of the choices has to do with strengthening K through 12 math and science. But for a university, I'm saying this. The majority of people in each of your STEM areas probably are not, they're not making it right now. And the question is, have you looked to see what the academic background has to be for someone to have a reasonable chance of making it in physics or in mathematics? And if someone doesn't have it, have you thought through what kind of advice and support you might give? We have bridge programs and things. If a student doesn't have a certain background, we're saying unless you build up your background to this level, you don't have a good chance of making it. But most places have not used their analytical skills to look at the trends. We've not used analytics to be more intelligent in our decision making, even in math, particularly in math and science. We have not used the skills or tools at our hand to understand the behavior and performance of our students. And that's what I want to see universities doing far more than they are right now. That's the issue. Our campus has the highest percent of students who actually graduate in science and engineering, almost half, of all races now. And 40% go immediately to grad and professional. We had 12 kids interviewed at the Harvard Medical School in 1 year, half minority, half white. And most for MD, PhDs. And it doesn't just happen. It's the faculty who decided to redesign courses and rethink how to get those people involved in the labs and in the work. Okay? Other questions, please? Somebody. Student question. Yes, Professor.
I'm just curious, when you work with the science teachers
Yes.
to reformulate
Yes.
or redesign the
Yes.
courses
Yes.
that originally might be flunk-out courses,
Right.
how were the professors, were they professors receptive to this?
This is, and that's culture. That's an excellent question. How do you get people to rethink the courses? Well, I mean, you don't make anybody in a university do anything. We know that. Not even students. You don't make them do anything. There are always ways of getting around things. It's always great. You form a committee and you're off and running, right? You get a report that goes on the shelf. The question is, what has to happen is you just need a few people who are willing to try something different. You're not trying to get everybody to do everything. And I'm the first to say, if you want faculty to do something different, you have to give them some resources and time to reflect and look at best practices to try. But it was in chemistry that few of the faculty said, you know, it's not right that 60% of the students earn below a C, and then another 20% are getting Cs, when kids are coming with good backgrounds in chemistry. Something's not right here. So they began to say, how might we rethink the course, get away from typically lecture and discussion. And so if you look at our Chemistry Discovery Center, you'll see for the first year chemistry that we don't give the students the theories. They have to discover the theories. We use problems out of the companies on campus. Our faculty and Hopkins faculty have started, we have 100 companies, biotech and IT companies on campus. Any state, any nation that will go ahead in economic development will put a heavy emphasis on STEM across the board. We've got thousands of additional jobs because of our emphasis just in our little region of Maryland based on the STEM development. Not only for STEM majors, but for my English majors in marketing. And I mean, it doesn't just create jobs for STEM, it creates jobs for people in all disciplines, for my political science people who are lobbying to get more money from Congress, you know, things like that. So the point, though, is it takes a small group willing to discuss best practices on other campuses. And then what happens is you get some success. Then you prove that the way may be better. Because as I said earlier today to a group, when we saw a 50% increase in the number of students of all races who were succeeding in Chem 101, meaning at least a B, other colleagues in that department said it's because the work is not as rigorous as the traditional way. We had the American Chemical Society come and evaluate rigor of the two approaches. It turns out the redesigned course was more rigorous than the old course. The tests were even more difficult. Now, once you show reasonable people the proof, then people say, okay, we need to get on board. But then you've got to give them the time to rethink not only the redesign, but the role of the faculty member in that class. So as we've been flipping more classes, and it's easier, I mean, the challenge in flipping in STEM is you really got to look at ways of doing it. So now to see engineering mathematics flipped, to see fluid mechanics flipped, it's really interesting. And flipping it meaning that they give them a part of a video, 20-minute video before they come to class. They give them some problems to solve before they come to class. The students solve them in groups using the Blackboard course management system. The faculty can see what they understand and what they don't understand. So when she comes in, she begins a lecture based on reaffirming what they do understand quickly, but really focusing on where they got stumped, and then most of the class time is spent on problem solving. So nobody can sit back and be cool and just take notes. Everybody has to be involved. That's the difference. I want a student question. Undergrad or grad? Yes, ma'am. Hi.
I have a question.
Yes.
I am interested in the collaborations that you and your student affairs staff make in order to bring more diversity into your STEM fields and also to give additional support to students in the STEM field.
Excellent, excellent. There are two things I would say. Number one, we spend a lot of time looking at who is succeeding and who's not. We spend a lot of time on focus groups with students from different backgrounds to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'm constantly involved in focus groups myself, but student affairs people are there, sometimes faculty are there, and we do this. Anytime you have a focus group and you want people to tell you the real deal, I always say, tell me something positive first. Because if you start with the bad, it's downhill after that. Because, you know, negativity breeds negativity, right? Don't talk about parking. It's always negative, right? But now you all have more space out here. You got a lot of land. It's a little different. On the East Coast, parking is a big issue for everybody. But the point is, so if they give me some positive context, what's going well? You know, whether it's the faculty or somebody or an advisor or whatever. And then, what are the problems? And then we ask, as you give us the problem, give us a possible solution, okay? And one of the things we do is to ensure that the student affairs staff and academic support staff and tutoring staff will be diverse groups. So when you look at the Chemistry Tutorial Center, which is different from the Chemistry Discovery Center, what you'll see is that we say that chemistry tutorial is not for people who are not doing well. Chemistry tutorial is for people who want to do really well. So you take away the stigma, because in high school, students think if I've got to be tutored, something's wrong with me. And so at the beginning of the semester, you would think it's a rock band and you're getting tickets. There are hundreds of students lined up to sign up of all races for the tutoring. Now, what we make sure we do is put the pictures of all the tutors on the big wall, and we make sure there's a very diverse group of people on that wall. And what's significant is to become a tutor, you must have been one of the best students the year before. You can never tutor if you were not tutored. And yet it's one of the prestigious roles on the campus. They get more money, right? And it makes all the difference in the world. The other point is that Student Affairs works with us in career development. So places like the National Security Agency will tell us, we want you to give us students to be interns from a diverse range, from students in general, of course, guys and women, but we want some students who have, so we want to make sure you get some black kids whose parents are from this country, because the highest achieving black kids often come from the islands or Nigeria, other places. We want those too, but we want some from this country because we need to hear how they think, because a kid from Nigeria thinks differently from a kid from DC, all right? We want Hispanic kids of both types, some who may have come from University of Puerto Rico, but we want Puerto Rican kids out of New York, which we have. We want kids from the Autonomous University of Mexico, but we also want Mexican-American kids from Texas. So the defense industry is by far the most enlightened industry in institution in America when it comes to diversity, because they get it. They are, and the healthcare people. I gave a talk in 2000 called Harvard Medicine at the Millennium, because we'd had all these kids, black and Hispanic and white and Asian, go there to med school. And they said this: we must prepare Harvard doctors to be leaders in America in healthcare. And to be a leader in healthcare, you've got to know how to deal with black kids, black guys who are coming in the emergency room. You got to be able to deal with Hispanic kids out of New York. You know, you cannot be uncomfortable. You can't simply be judgmental. You need to understand the socio-cultural factors that led to addiction. You see, so they were getting that point about understanding more than just the science, but rather understanding the cultural perspective and getting kids really involved. For us, science and inclusive excellence, we have teams. We sometimes tease and call them salt and pepper teams, but black and white and Asian and Hispanic kids who go as a group who've been working in a biochemistry lab on AIDS research, who will go and work in counseling HIV patients to understand that human perspective that goes with understanding molecular structure, you see? And so it gives, and that's what makes them so attractive to med schools, because they're not just doing the science, they're understanding all those issues involving poverty, income, race, ethnicity, urban environment, all of that, because we're in a suburban area. We've got 600 acres from my campus, but in 20 minutes you're downtown Baltimore. So it's being able to get people into those kinds of environments and to have them tutoring. Our students, we have this theme on campus that says to serve is an honor. We don't require service, but most students are involved in service. We supervise 500 poor children who are first-time offenders 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We make sure they're up in the morning, in school during the day. We bring kids on campus in the evenings. These are first-time offenders. We get them back up the next day. And large numbers of students of all races are involved with those children, which teaches working and middle-class kids that poor kids are just like them. They just need support, right? So student affairs people, working with academic affairs people, are involved in all these kinds of projects. Okay? All right. Any final question? Yes. Yeah. What is that noise? What is that? Can you hear me? I hope you can hear me.
Sorry, I can't help with the noise. I am an administrator here at Missouri State.
Can this man bring the sound about? Say it again.
I'm an administrator here at Missouri State,
okay.
And I've had the opportunity over the last 2 years to work with some psychology faculty members who have done course transformation and who have flipped a class to great success.
Yes.
They have for years done pre and post testing. They are showing 55% gains in student learning outcomes.
Excellent.
However, there are a lot of challenges to flipping classes. There are many students that don't like the class because it is much more challenging and rigorous than before. And faculty sometimes have to endure lower student evaluations. So what kinds of things have you done on your campus to meet those challenges
Sure.
and to encourage faculty to continue these kinds of course transformations?
Sure. Your president talked about this. He's very proud of that. He talked about that flipped class in psychology. We've done the same thing in psych. There's several things I would say. I mentioned this, that we've been able to show that just to go back to chemistry for a minute, every time a student does not retake Chemistry 101, we save $1,700. Before, we had hundreds of students retaking courses, which meant literally taking longer to finish, beating their heads against the wall so some of them still didn't make it, having to have more sections because of all the kids repeating courses, right? So we literally have figured out how much money we are saving, and that helps me with the legislature, number one. Number two, I get lots of emails from students in the first year work complaining that they hate it. They hate it. First of all, every kid who has a 5 wants to go on to the next level of work. Well, ours is an honors campus, so I've got large numbers of black kids, white kids, Asian kids who have 5s on A, B, and BC calculus, on chemistry, AP, and all of that. We've used the data analysis to show that a student who starts with the next year of chemistry, even though they've had the AP 5s, will 80% will get below a B, even with the 5s. We can show parents that, and we can say you can take the chance if you want to, but if you get a C in that second year of organic chemistry, you're not going to med school. Not going to happen. No, it's too competitive, and you certainly aren't going for the MD PhD, since only the top 5% will get into MD PhDs, right? So they get that point. And the same thing in mathematics. When you can show the data, the question is, if you let students go to the next level course or whatever, have you looked to see what the probability is they can make it? And so they have that information. Now, the other point is about hating the course. Large numbers hate the course. What makes the difference for us twofold. Number one, we show them the larger percentage of students succeeding as a result of this. Because everybody says, oh, I'd be okay anyway. But when we can show, as you did, so many more, you need to publicize, you need to have them understanding. You don't like this right now, number one, but you will see the results, and we'll show you the results. You had a much higher probability of doing well because of what we did. But number two, this is the new world. You know, I'll never forget, I got this letter from this group of students in one of the engineering courses that had been flipped. And they wrote to me saying what the teacher was doing, how she insisted that they do work before they come to class, that they have to do all this work before they even come to class. And yeah, they're getting better grades. They said, well, so why do we need the teacher? Why are you paying her if I'm doing all the work, right? You know, and I called them in, and the first thing I did, I really shocked them. I said, well, we're paying her so they can teach you not to be a smart ass. That's why we're doing it. They were shocked. What? He did? The president said that? Yeah, I said it. Because that's what an employer would say. You know, give me a break. Stop being a kid, right? Let me grow up, right? Now, here, and then it made them laugh after that. But I did shock them. I really did say that. When you get to be 60, you can say whatever you want to say, all right? But this is the point. Students have been taught to believe that the teacher is supposed to open their heads and pour the knowledge in there. That's your job, teacher. And so this is about culture change in America. I can't tell you. My books focus on raising kids of color in math and science, but the lessons count for kids in general. And it's about how you get kids to get excited about math and science, from Legos as a little kid to things you do to help a child learn to ask questions. But the most important lesson from the parents was that they understood that the teacher had a responsibility, but parents have a responsibility, and the child has a responsibility. That Riley at 13, I mean, I've been watching him the whole night. I'm amazed that he's not asleep. I mean, thank you, Riley. I know you're tired, but you know, give him another hand, would you please? I'm serious at it. You know, I'm amazed that he's been, you know, when a 13-year-old can stick with you, you know, it's a big deal. But I'm saying if we can teach children the responsibility they can have, then they begin to understand, I take ownership of my education. I can't tell you how many parents will tell me when their child can't read, it's the teacher's fault. And I say, well, what are you doing at home? You don't have to be a college-educated person to help your child learn to read first grade, right? And then what's the child doing? So my point is, the more you do this, the more it will become the norm. Anytime you have change, people at all levels will fight it. We know that. And the question is how not to fight them, but to give them a chance to be pulled in a positive way into the work. I think there should be praise given to the faculty and to the students, because this is courage to try something different from what you've been doing. There needs to be a lot of praise. It's wonderful that your president talks about it. It helps when the leaders say, this is exciting. This is leading the way. That's what we did. And so I've got videos of stuff I've got on my iPhone of the Chemistry Discovery Center. We've got pictures all around when it comes to inclusive excellence. I want to show faculty and people and women and people of color and others working in labs. I want to show students from all races, all cultural backgrounds working together. You should have pictures, just as we have pictures of the athletic stuff that goes on. We need pictures and symbolic ways of saying, this is the most important thing that could be happening at this university. And then you need to take it to your legislature. That's what we've done. I've pulled legislators in. I've had my governor looking at chemistry discovery. I had the president. I'm advisor to the president. I had him in his last State of the Union address talking about course redesign. See, policy. When the president talks about it, then what happens is people propose things to Congress, and then Congress says the national agencies, NSF, NIH, DOE, need to give incentives to schools and universities to have programs that encourage this kind of work. And then money comes to places, because universities don't have extra money, that will allow for the time and professional development. And you're going to see more and more NSF money going for course redesign. If you've not done it already, I would take my psychology and what you've done and talk to people there at NSF, because you can get money and grants that can give incentives to people to use it as a model for doing other courses. That's the one. The other thing from the faculty in here, final, that I want you to hear, we've really leveraged our success with the Gates Foundation, with the Howard Hughes Medical Institute. We have an investigator, HHMI investigator, but I just told people, the Howard Hughes people just put almost a $2 million life sciences lab of the 21st century on our campus. It's the best thing that could happen, that science faculty from other universities can come and tour and be trained on in the summer, and we use it during the year. And it is a completely different model, heavily technology-based, very colorful, all these orange and pink, all these colors. It's very interesting, because the research shows the more colorful the lab, the more creativity there is. Very interesting. But whether it's all around glass, and the glass turns into whiteboards, with a flick of a switch, and you see, and it's just a different way of thinking, and it's all based on collaboration. The point is, the more you can collaborate with national agencies and foundations, the more you'll have money to give incentives to people to try new things. Okay? So, last question. Yes. Yes. Hi.
Hi.
Is that Jamie? Hey, Jamie. How are you? He's one of my former mentees from years ago when he and I were both young. Hey, Jamie.
Exactly. For 17 years.
Yeah. Hi.
So, I just want to say, first of all, that's real. Everything he said is not just for show. That's how he is.
Thank you, Jamie.
And so I appreciate you. Freeman, you talked about choice, not chance.
Yes, yes.
And so what I want you to just share with us before you close is, what is the criteria that you've used to make good choices?
That's excellent. What criteria do we use to make good choices? It's a great question. For the president and for faculty, one of the questions that I asked students was, what is Morehead State known for? I would argue that in making choices, you want to ask the question, where do we have some strengths? Psychology or the sciences or other disciplines, all right? Where are there people who are willing to try something new in student affairs, all right? How might people from academic affairs and student affairs work collaboratively on some interesting project, whether it's involving living learning floors or issues of diversity, because the more there is an emphasis on not only academic performance, but how students feel about the campus, the higher the retention rates. The more connected students get to somebody and something on a campus, the greater the chance the student will stay. And all of us are trying to get beyond half the students not graduating. And so the idea of the criterion being, where is there a chance for fertile ground? Who are the people willing to have a conversation about something new or different? How might we creatively connect faculty and student affairs people to work with some group that may not be doing well on the campus right now, right? And most important, choosing a measure for evaluation. How can you do something that you can evaluate in 2 years and say, this investment was worth it? Because you can't invest in everything. You got to choose 2 or 3 things. And what we did, we have what we call a multi-year approach, Jamie. Everybody wants money. But if you can get the campus to say, okay, everybody will get a turn, but let's start with these 2 or 3 things. Let's see what's possible with these 2 or 3 things. You know, when we chose to work on this issue of, I mean, the black kids, you remember, on my campus, our campus was considered the most racist in the state because all these black kids came in wanting pre-med and they were all flunking out. But what people didn't know was a lot of the white kids were flunking out. It's just that you had a larger base of white kids in science, but still only 30-some% were making it. So you had people making it, so everybody thought everything was okay. So the black kids called the place racist, white kids called it cold. And so there was a need to look at what we need to do for all races to connect student affairs people and faculty to understand the perspectives of students. If there were one choice that was important to me that I think you want to think about, it is how do your students, grad students, undergrad students, students in STEM, students not in STEM, students from different backgrounds, low-income kids, that's the group we don't talk about enough. Kids who are first-generation college need special support because they've not been hearing about college all their lives because their parents didn't go. So that's of any race. I mean, how's that group doing? You know, that's a part of that diversity issue, right? You know, students with different sexuality. How do we deal with that? How do they feel on this campus? Are they treated right? All these different ways in which people are different. The question is, how do you go about hearing those perspectives and then figuring out, okay, where might we start to make a difference? Okay? We're going to end with my giving you a quote. I want everybody to stand. Give you a stand. I'm going to give you this invigorating quote that I use all the time that Jamie knows. So I want you to hear it first, and then I'm going to work with you on it. It's anonymous, and it says, watch your thoughts, they become your words. Watch your words, they become your actions. Watch your actions, they become your habits. Watch your habits, they become your character. Watch your character, it becomes your destiny. It's a wonderful quote for students and all of us. You know, and it's, again, it's anonymous. So it says thoughts, words, actions, habits, character, destiny. Say it with me. Thoughts, words, actions, habits, character, destiny. One more time. Thoughts, words, actions, habits, character, destiny. One final time. Thoughts, words, actions, habits, character, destiny. Okay, here we go. Watch your thoughts, they become your. Watch your words, they become your. Watch your actions, they become your. Watch your habits, they become your. Watch your character, it becomes your. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Very nice. Good group. Good group. Very nice. Thank you.